Quetzalcoatl included hallucinogenic mushrooms, psilocybin. So their technology to get to that place of absolute surrender using magical mushrooms was a devotional act to Quetzalcoatl, when the ego just goes. And so there's a lot more detail in my reference book, which I recommend to people. The thing that is a bit sad is that he was the god of light, justice, and mercy, and the wind, Quetzalcoatl. He was an utterly benign deity. He abolished human sacrifice, which some of the Aztecs were going into. He said, no, that's not on. That's not necessary, let everyone live their lives. Celebrate love. He was sometimes considered the god of the morning star, or the lord of the star of the dawn. He was regarded as the inventor of books, because these people were literate, they had their own writing systems. And the lord of time, the calendar, which was very, very advanced by the Mayan and Aztec peoples. He was the patron of the priests. But he had an enemy, a rival. And this is shown in the card as a figure here, who opposed every single thing he stood for and desperately wanted to destroy Quetzalcoatl. And he was his rival and his evil twin, if you want. Ultimately, and this is a problem with light workers, people that desperately work for light, it almost conjures up the workers of darkness. How can we bring that love, that compassion, that mercy into being without bringing up the counter echo? This is a problem. It's like we're seeing this in American politics here, which is the land of Quetzalcoatl. When we get Biden being all truth and love and light and Quetzalcoatlish, we have Trump appearing determined to bring him down. How can we avoid that dialectic between good and evil? Is it possible? Well, the Quetzalcoatl story is the following, that he was eventually defeated by this evil figure. I won't mention his name. And he was forced to leave the land. He had to go into a boat and he had to retire. It's a bit like, when Osiris was forced out by Seth. It's a similar story, the Seth-Osiris dialectic and the Quetzalcoatl story. So he had to leave and become a refugee in a little boat. And then all the negative things were brought into Aztec civilization and culture, human sacrifice, cruelty, torture, and all this stuff, in the name of the gods, which was of utter blasphemy. But the tradition persisted that Quetzalcoatl will come back, he will return, and he will bring us back to the path of righteousness. So what happened was that, and this is just one of the strange things about history, is when the conquistadors turned up, Spanish people, Cortez and others, the Native Americans thought they must be bringing back the medicine and the magic of Quetzalcoatl. They were hoping they would come back. And they saw the power of their weapons and they thought, and they heard some of the stories about Christ and so on, they thought, well, they're bringing back the magic of Quetzalcoatl. And that's why they didn't really fight. They didn't, they could have massacred these people, but instead they kind of accepted them into their midst. And the conquistadors, not knowing any better, did some massacring the other way, tragically. But what I would say is that the promise of Quetzalcoatl is not completely fulfilled yet. There are people, and I know some Latin American shamans, who still say the true potential of Quetzalcoatl is still not returned to us because we haven't got peace. we had a sort of promise of this thing called Christianity, but it hasn't been lived up to properly. These people are not living up to their own teachings. And so they're still waiting for Quetzalcoatl to return fully. His enemy was called Tezcatlipoca, and he was also called the Smoking Mirror, which was the name of the dark mirror he would use for his priests to have magical visions in. So they were kind of doing, if you want, black magic to misuse spiritual power for their own personal ego, which is totally antithetical to the authentic use of spirituality, which is the white magic, which accepts and embraces vision for the community, for the betterment, the healing of the community, not for your empowerment over against the community. So this struggle is still going on, I would say. This wind magic of truth that Quetzalcoatl stands for is still trying to bring in the morning star to us, which is one of peace. But it's still touch and go whether we're going to get there, because look at Ukraine. As I say, Putin hasn't been, he's from the dark smoking mirror school of thought, and the Russian neo-fascists that surround him, just as Hitler was. These people are not, they're not on the right hymn book. And I would say nor is Netanyahu and nor are Hamas. Both in their blindness have been pursuing the dark path. So the tarot here, I think, are saying the Elohim is the overall forces that surround and protect us, the matrix of the divine intelligence. But what we need to do is bring back the Lord of mercy and compassion, bring back the Night of Winds, so that all of humanity can enjoy the fruits of this planet together instead of in competition. I noted that the Pope has just called Ukraine to embrace the white flag, the path of peace. But I think what should happen, I mean, if he's implying they should just surrender to Russia, I don't think that's going to happen. What I think should happen is that both sides, all of us, should simultaneously surrender to the absolute divine intelligence, which wants peace for all of us, and work out then the details of what that means. And when it comes to Elohim, there's a plurality of identities possible here, because if I'm living in the Donbass and I'm part Russian, part Ukrainian, part interested in the West, part I've got a girlfriend in Russia, I'm mixed up. I don't know whose side I'm on. So, I don't want to fight in any army, and I should be able to affirm that multiplicity. I call it simplexity. So it's a complex simplicity. I should be able to affirm that, and we have to have political structures that enable me to be everything all at once. Maybe I'm a bit of a Buddhist, maybe I'm a bit of a Kabbalist, maybe I want to study Sufism. I need a mature democratic structure to enable me to do that freely. That's what we have in France, and I would like that to be in Ukraine and Russia and other countries, so that we have liberty, equality and fraternity, which I think is what Quetzalcoatl wants too. So anyway, I like these two gods. They're pretty cool. They bring good promise. And also spring's coming. It's coming up to the spring equinox. It's Commonwealth Day tomorrow. So let's hope that we can all share our commonwealth across every culture and every philosophy. Any other questions? Have you been to Latin America?
Yes.
Where did you go?
In Brazil, in Manaus and the surroundings, and also in Colombia.
Okay.
North side.
That must have been interesting. When was that, in the 80s or 90s?
Oh, in the only maybe in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the 2000s. Yeah. Huh. Well,
I was wondering, because it's difficult to explain, but
you can say it in French if you want.
Oui. On voit que l'approche pour la paix est une approche facilement accessible individuellement. Mais quand on parle de communauté, c'est beaucoup plus difficile puisque les leaders des communautés essayent de souder la communauté avec un ennemi commun. Et c'est là que les histoires commencent.
Oui, oui, oui. Oui, c'est vrai ça. Yes. Qu'est-ce que c'est la solution pour ça? Alors, yes, it's very true that we can find peace individually, but collectively it's more difficult because leaders almost benefit from keeping enmity alive because they get power. Like Netanyahu, perfect example, he's risen to power on hating the Palestinians and causing fear and hatred. And so have Hamas risen to power in Gaza because they cause fear and hatred against the Israelis. So what do? You know, it's how the Brexit Tories got Brexit because they raised fear and hatred against all Europeans, which is bonkers because we are Europeans too. But they did it because they control the media. And there are many other examples. Trump raising this hatred of Islam too. You know, the supreme egotist in politics. Of course he hates Islam. He wouldn't even have a clue what it means, what I'm explaining. I mean, it's just a thing to demonize the other with. So, and race comes into that, you know. Yes, I think, what's the answer? Well, just a little footnote here. Quetzalcoatl was the lord of the bouncing rubber balls.
Rubber balls?
The balls. And the games. They invented the use of rubber to have these complicated games where they would throw the ball bouncing, you know. So what became basketball and cricket and all these ball games, that's Quetzalcoatl's invention. And the idea, I think, is that if we can get people playing games, then you can work out your enmity against, you know, in the game field.
Yeah.
But you don't kill each other. It's just fun. It's play. It's Leela. When I came back from Paris, I was on the train, sitting next to a mother and two daughters from France. They're both all very elegant French family. And I noticed the daughters were playing chess on their mobile phones. And I, you know, had a 2-hour train journey and I'd already read Le Monde. So I thought, well, I'll download chess. And I played a couple of games against the computer. And it's great fun. I mean, you know, because you can work up to levels and play at beginner's level. And I love chess. So Quetzalcoatl is the lord of the games. And we humans, we love to play games. Homo ludens is the technical term philosophically for us. We like to play games. And that's fun. When we're kids, that's what we love to do. We play. I'd like to see the world go back to playing.
Yeah, I agree.
And enjoying. And then the leader is somebody that can let the game happen to the most benefit of all the players. It's not about winning. And I think of Hermann Hesse, who I mentioned earlier. His book, The Glass Bead Game, which won the Nobel Prize, which I read, is a masterpiece. He envisions a future of humanity a few hundred years from now when people play this thing called the glass bead game, which is a mixture of music, mathematics, philosophy, languages, and it's like chess played, you know, on a huge chessboard across, and it takes like 20 years to play a really good game. It's a good book to read. So I think that's what Quetzalcoatl would say. Let's enjoy the games. And have more peace games instead of war games, which kids are playing. Let's make them like adventure games. You have to get to the cave and find the lost manuscript and, you know, all that stuff.
Delphic games?
Which ones?
Delphic.
Well, thank you. The Delphic games is an example of why I'm bothering to support that project, which is very important. And we have colleagues in Latin America who are helping with it. Let's get the Delphic games as well known as the Olympic Games. And let's do that instead of, like the Ukraine war, it's a silly game. The bombing of Gaza is a very silly game. These people need to just grow up. So that's my answer. I don't know if that helps. Yeah. Okay, merci. Right, I'm going to finish tonight. We won't do a rune because there's not time here. Oh look, got a little creature come to visit. Hello, beetle. It's like a red type of beetle. Yes, very interesting. It's come to say hello. Animals like playing games too. Right, you can have the red beetle. I'm going to end with a poem today, which is something I used to do. I think that it will be fun to do that. Ha. Well, okay, look, I better read this poem because it's what opened, right? And it's a love poem to the moon goddess. Since I described the hippie thing as eclectic goddess worship, right? So as a poet, this is my testimony to that lineage, right? And inspired by Robert Graves, the White Goddess, it started me on my quest as a young little bard, apprentice druid, which I still am, really. So this is called Love Poem to the Moon Goddess. And it's from volume 7 of my poems, which I published, covering poems written between 2016 and 2020. So, yeah, recent-ish. She has followed me through 1,000,000 incarnations. Or have I followed her? It is impossible to say. Every time I become mathematical and start counting, the wind blows the tree tips with an insouciant sigh. And news comes in from reality that makes the hair stand up on the neck's nape, and the swans go sailing by. She's here in each lover's kiss or brief lip touching, stretching forward each sinew of possibility, until the deep, moist togetherness overwhelms us both, and our souls become a common theme, one idea in the mind of light itself. She has been there as lover and muse since I began dreaming, perplexing. In my first ever dream as a long, dark-haired singer, I would follow behind her as she, singing in off-key Oriental Greek half notes, leading me on towards a destiny I'd stumbled down into, with a growing sense of love at the core of me, a void fullness, an emptiness selfness. She has always followed through. I know not her name. She was an oath or a promise I had taken eons ago, before rocks here were made or water cascaded down into pools for strange forms' wonderment. She was the Shekinah of space, and I was the clustering starlight. She was the blue of astounding brightness, and I was the sunlight bursting forth and raying out golden into the darkness, looking for how to hold, looking for some way, some place, some tangible embrace I could cradle her by, or tease her into becoming formed. She was always the permeating darkness, the empty blue-black sky. And she arrived singing. And I came following after her, always enchanted and enchanting, with my long cloak and hat wide-brimmed, and her deep eyes. I don't know if she was following me, or I was lying in wait for her. We tried out different bodies. She was always the same difference. Her breasts sometimes smooth and Artemis strong and subtle, sometimes Aphrodite round and liquid as the moon at full on high. So I loved her and wooed her and kissed her. How I cradled and tickled, licked and rippled her silky smooth round moons. But she never stayed. She was always waving goodbye, and soon to be gone. I would look for her then, and all I could find was the deep darkness of waiting, there forlorn and alone. Until suddenly she would return in some other guise, another player in the pageant stream, another waking princess found and up and dancing, would let me worship her just a little, let me kiss and woo, delve and dive, squelch and merge, until our souls were blended and time stopped. It came to an end and a fulfillment, the gap of grace, beyond time's striving, and the poised perfect presence of peace. But then she's up and off again, sailing through the deep blueness of things, always onward and over, under and through, always round and around, beyond measuring. So I kept watch. I notched my bones with her appearances and made marks. I watched time for her return. My mind became earthed, all active and waiting. A field where numbers arrived during epochs. Then Athena came to make attendance of us all, in all those spaces, those empty, full, dark plenitudes, the kind where galaxies form. And Athena came out and smiled, and became as form and number, dancing. She led me on in turn, down curious equations, through emblems and geometric shapes, and endless dialogue poems, alongside rivers and waterfalls, invoking and praying for each aching tear, each homeless family, each hungry child. Athena looked at me as asking, why? Questions I couldn't answer. So I took to roaming the Acropolis, set up an academy nearby, and she came after me, her long grey hair and her owl-like eyes shining. And I gave in, surrendered, taught perplexity. Life after life, I have drunk the poison. My whole neck is blue from it. But still she comes on with those gazing eyes and the tears filling mine that I need to assuage and to blink back whole. If I were a poet, I would mutter spells and prayers and burn incense and incantations until the goddess herself took form before me. If I were an astronomer, I would soar up in a beautiful spaceship and land on her and sing prayers and hymns of praise. I would found a religion of space and time worship, bring moon rocks back. I would give people faith again. Yes, we did go there. Hold this rock and feel its current coursing through you and around. Watch the children's eyes light up and grow luminous with wonder. Never before in print, these mysteries, only breathed by poets, in tune with the nights and the woods, in love with the light pale orb and the silvery silky breast of beauty. All I can do is scratch these few lines and hope and calculate and wonder. Voila. love poem to the moon goddess. That's quite a fun poem and seems quite appropriate to finish today's session. Now we have to translate it into French.
Ah.
C'est difficile, mais we'll see what Google Translate does. Okay, thank you so much for tonight, and I hope my daughter is well on her return.